What the war did to my legs and to my tongue, you should have raised a baby girl. I should have been a better son. Jardway. Episode 4. I wanted to work it out, just to see if I'd be missed. In which the journey finally begins. An Ouroboros of blades. Things are changing, as always. Sorry for the delay. Like I said, things have been rough and, well, there's a lot to talk about here, if anyone is listening. There is a cold wind here. It echoes through the hollow abandonment of my bones, the cavities left behind by change, an eroding cliffside singing out in a pain-filled melody. The concrete beneath me cracks and slithers like a tidal wave of worms or sinew beneath flesh. The silence that cloaks the frosty night air is sharper and colder than any of the surroundings. Only the sound of my heavy footsteps slices through, pulling it apart as warm meat, fresh from countless hours in the pot. The streetlights shift as I walk slowly down the long, dark stretch of the road, power lines hanging like flayed veins, inky as the blood that now ran through mine. Their bulbs falter as the bright, intrusive phosphor begins to fade, softening out to a running egg yolk tallow, thickening their lights to a melting butter as it continued to darken, bubbling crimson as the eyes of the fallen angels. The darkness too grew deeper, a clumping of twisting shadows, pools of void and stars. I had reached my destination. I curled the fingers of this awful human form around the railing of the train station. If the air was ice and knives, this small sliver of pipe was stillness and battering rams. The upper layer of skin upon my 2 large fingers began to lift, peeling cold and burnt as I continued to climb. Dark olive began to spread across the crumbling flakes, turning at the edges to ash beneath the watchful eyes of my guardians. How long had it been since I had relished this deeply in the symphony of pain, rejoiced at the feeling of that small lightning that creeps like burning vines along delicate nerve endings? I reached down the hand which was not beginning to necrose. The phone pulled with the grace of a flick knife from the soft ebony fabric, already beginning to bleed through again. 7 days, 13 hours, and 54 minutes. This was the time in which I had not broken apart the pieces of me for selfish pleasure. I would not succumb so easily. This night, this dream, I had not set out with harm as intent, and as such I would see the bait that had been laid, however deep my foot was in the trap. At least it was not I who placed it there. The cold metal of the station echoed with a hollow darkness as the metal twisted in and out of shape, like labored breathing of forsaken lungs. Pustules of modern artwork dotted the walls, bleeding alveoli hanging like grapevines, splattered with blinking dust-rimmed eyes. I wondered then what it would feel like to be an electrical pulse running up and down those great, abhorrent veins, contorted into that space of plaster and shadow, rushing to inform the pulsating sack of fat and wire, of the atrocities which came to wall in the corridors of its body. Paste, tile of the floor, slick and shining ivory, the air coming in fever-thick waves. Somehow even here, I knew where I needed to be, the train I would need to take, the destination I would never reach. Closure is a strange thing. It never truly comes, though we tell ourselves it does. Nothing is ever simple. A cure has side effects. Light and air can kill. What God would make such a world and still be considered good? But I am rambling again. Thoughts, I think, for me at least, come in waves. They ebb and flow like the disorders that often create them. I saw then, interrupting the pool of my mind, in which I had so happily been drowning, a couplet of lights toward the end of the ash-dark hallway. I was not alone here, and whether or not that was a good thing, I couldn't bring myself to care. The thing, then, to which those burning eyes belonged, began to turn. I would follow, despite how foolish it was, even in dream. Once at last, we had emerged into the station platform, the cool knife of the night air, a relief from the congested lungs of the station. I could see now, under that void silk spun with stars, there was a moonless night, the creature which stood before me. The fox spoke in a voice that was made of gravel and ash, burning the blood red of its coat. The words I can no longer remember, though they cut like blades, cracking loudly through my sharpening vertebrae. I know they reminded me of him. Once, long ago, after the damage and the fall, but before I could finally escape, I knew a cat, cramped and forced into burning broken flesh, never quite fit right, no matter how hard he tried. We were alike in that way. Bodies, names, souls, nothing quite fit us. I wish sometimes could have known him before we both became so shattered, when there was still a life we could live. He told me once how pretty the stars would look, burning within the crook of my collarbone. If only he was still around to see how right he was. Who are you? I ask, for once out of my depth, drowning in these strange dreams. The fox laughed, and with that flowing, burning laughter, forest fires and floods, I knew that behind those lively eyes, the fox was only the skin that the thing was wearing. In that way, we are all too similar, and yet terrifyingly different. With far too many teeth for that mouth, all guillotine sharp, it said. You know me. We are one. I think, more than even you, are whole. Its fur swaying in the breeze, becoming autumn's dying leaves, bursting now with rot. It was then, as the thing that was not quite a fox spoke, that I began to unravel. Sown stardust blood trickling slowly along the gashes of those well-trodden valleys. Silver scar tissue ripping and folding open across the bare expanse of my arms and thighs, turning now not oxidizing crimson, but rotten ink. New blood flowing from old wounds. I gripped my rapidly yellowing teeth, maggots germinating and crawling through the soft warmth of my decaying flesh. You cannot be him. Not this soon. We aren't ready. Thunder crackling like laughter. The thing before me raises its snout of gaping knives and releases the ball of lightning sizzling and melting within its throat. Nothing in life comes when you are ready. We of all people are things like people. Should know that. They say I made you in my image. I made you broken and retching. It was fun. I did give you something of mine, though. Complexity, he says, gesturing with his snout to the torn shreds of me. But you can see, that was more of a curse. His crow-sharp eyes stare through me. Why now? Why here? The thing that was not a fox began to walk towards my splitting, aching body, his bones snapping and grinding to a floating dust, a distant light shining now, the fluid, inky tracks. My train was soon to arrive. I wanted to see how far you'd come, how your little heresy is brewing. He stood then, a grotesque caricature of anthropomorphism, old torn ligament and shattered bone, eyes turned glass of failed taxidermy. He took my cheek in his hand, turning, snapping the fragile neck, claws sharp as razors. I am, after all, called a shepherd, and sometimes it does well to let the wolf among the flock, to save the effort and image of culling and for entertainment. Of course, once the wolf finishes the job, I will have to save my poor little sheep. And I even get to keep the coat. Sparks ran like water down the knives of his fingers, dancing through the scarred threads of connective tissue that held what was left of me loosely together, igniting the corners of my nerves in a cleansing fire. As the screeching of brakes sliced through that pristine silence, I staggered, crunching neck and rotting limbs snapping like dry twigs as I crashed towards the tracks. He turned, crooning one last message, sharp as ice, crackling with static. Stay behind the yellow line. Mind the gap. And with that, I was swallowed, the train rolling wet as waves over my desiccated body. The gravel of the back road crackles before us and pops unpaved save thorns and brambles, perhaps an omen to come in the abandoned pathways behind the town which we were leaving. A service station ahead, its old stained windows glowing in the dying evening light. An outpost, a last chance for my passenger to run from our journey. There would be no going back for either of us once we had begun. The world would swallow us into a dark and empty nothing, burning with more further than the existence which we held tentatively to. I woke late and was long gone in that forest, contemplating the warm comfort of a peaceful death I could not afford. I was nothing if not stubborn in the most hidden ways, and I would not let him win so easily. I would not either leave the person to which I had promised this great journey, the corpse, and the kind of lack of purpose that lived within the crooks of my hips. It had been late when I finally left, the air shifting sepia as the shadows of oak and pine began to grow long. It was only 2 past the center of the day, and yet it was winter. I had woken again, for the first time in a long time, in a pool of my blood, and the sun was already beginning to sink toward the waiting horizon, dripping warm amber. The ride so far had been quiet. Nothing but our mutual hatred of him simmering between us. I had never been one for conversation. The fear crackled like static between the hollows of my bones, growing to a lightning storm at the thought of it. As the car pulled into the soft gravel of the park, rushing the gentle buds of weeds, crawling vines in its haste, I tried to quiet the raging foam of anxiety, to converse with the passenger beside me. "Do you want anything? It's going to be a long ride." Then, after a moment of silence, rubbing at the gently growing bags beneath my eyes, their nerves are evident in the creases of their face, as mine, too young for the things it has seen, their flickering gaze, bright and wary despite the growing darkness. I think, can I come?" "Sure." The edges of exhaustion slinking the way into that word much more than I would have wanted, as my rough hand reached for the door handle, more ash now than rubber, begin to pull down, clicking into place and stepping into the night. Here, despite our shared anxieties, I could at least, for a moment, find comfort in the crunching gravel and the melancholy audio in which I tried to drown what little of my soul I had left. In this cold, star-filled void of a winter night, I feel almost like there is something in this life other than escaping, and I can feel the wings and claws and tattered teeth that are part of me and not. Nothing I feel is concrete or single, and this is what it truly means to be alive. I flicked the hem of my sleeve gently upwards, watching as the silvered traceries of my past glinted fresh wax of moonlight. Surely, when I had once again split along those old familiar lines, it had been a dream, though how much of that was influenced by outside forces? Was the one we were about to trail these old broken roads for So truly so close. And why now, after all this time, these tears, spilt blood, did he now take such interest? The doors of the service station hissed their cold, clean, dying sigh as they slid sickly open. The doors of a hospital ward, complete with the stench of antiseptic and walls scrubbed clean of bruised flesh and blood. These dream things are beginning to bleed together. I still know the lines of reality, though everything within that bubble is beginning to feel hazy and cutting. A deficiency in neurotransmitters, or so the literature will say. I wonder if my life becomes one day more than a drop in the ocean of time, or the secret layers of me are ever peeled by some condescending PhD graduate charging hundreds per hour for a chance of normalcy. Maybe then they would see how much more complicated this is. I am slipping again. I desperately search the shelves for something with which to ease the despair and derealization pooling in the depths of my stomach. I light then upon it. Despite the years that have passed, I recognize the tragic escape held within that little sharpener, now slipping quietly into the pocket of my jeans. As I go then, to once again break myself apart in search of a stable crumb I can pass. I pass by autumn, whispering comfort and offering of payment for an item of their choice, excusing myself to the back of the station. Clean white tile, rimmed at the edges with time and travel. The place was empty, despite its liminality. The bright, heavy door of the bathroom opened with a terrible reluctance, as if even it knew the horrors of the path I was about to re-enter. I gripped the steel rail, breath now drawn ragged and painful from electrified lungs. It was terrifying how easy it was to fall back into these old rotting habits. The release it gave. How much I missed this. My cold, cracked fingers pulled at the plastic casing, tearing, unscrewing, in a desperate familiar dance until I had freed the blade like yolk from an egg, and it sat trembling in the bare shell of my hand. Leather unbuckling, denim shifting lower. This was all now second nature as the haze began to thicken. The hatred and fear and despair filling the great pit at the center of me. By the time I placed the clean sliver to the open barren of my thigh, and there was nothing left of the person that had entered that room. My hands were shaking, like the hot summer's day I had tried and failed to consume until my heart exploded, bloody and raw, from the cage of my ribs. Slowly, I pushed down, slowly wiping the blade across the skin in an arc of dopamine and adrenaline and pain. At first there was nothing but sensation and a rush of almost normalcy. Then, bubbling upwards in their constellations, small droplets, came the crimson river, met soon with dripping salt of tears. Again I went, and again, then switching to the other leg, chemicals rushing along the fat and meat of my brain, soul and skin carved into a new picture. Eventually, I wiped the tears from my eyes and the first cascades of blood from my body, stopping momentarily in the mirror to admire the skill. A broken laugh escaped me then. I still had it. After all this time, a smile that would not last crept its way across my face. For now, at least, at the cost of breaking a body I had never loved, I would feel whole. There was nothing they had wanted but a box of razors. The shine of the cold station lights on the lifeless branding of the cardboard did make me wonder. Beneath those bright colors and burning eyes, did they too break in the same way as I? Did we split along those same lines? Something that should not be dwelt on, I think. I added a few cartons of instant noodles, a rare comfort for the coming days, and a pair of shears, not this time from my own body. I met him last night. It was a dream and not. They pick up on the italicization, the created meaning within the words, and it sent a cold fire down their spine. Now? This soon? What did he say? Nothing forward. Everything was wrapped in metaphors and bear traps. We need to make another stop tonight. Silence grew between us like crystals in a children's chemistry primer, now cracked gently with a soft-spoken hammer. I think I know somewhere too, but that is a journey for tomorrow. There was so much like him that it broke me. Quieter, I guess. But still, if only you were here to see what change he had wrought, what boundaries had been broken in his name. We drove in that crystalline silence again, as winding gravel, bordered with brambles and scraping branches, turned slowly to straight tar and rolling hills, dotted with the lights of distant fires. Maybe those homes belonged to people who lived happy, safe lives, not constantly clawing themselves from the pit that was their own mind. I envy them, even as I pity them. For pain is a true source of art, even as it destroys you. Eventually, we reached the destination I had in mind, hidden down a long and barely noticeable dirt driveway, filled with warning signs, of which held no meaning to those who did not value their own lives above our goals. I slowly exited the stolen machine. All three of us were running on borrowed time, borrowed fuel. Hefting the pair of shears as I walked slowly towards the fence, it was then that Autumn realized what I was retrieving. They watched with wide eyes as I climbed and tore, twisting sharp metal and leaving behind blood. By now, too, my jeans were beginning to bleed through. Dark wine stains of my mistakes, desperate attempts showing. They say barbed wire magic is for those who have nothing left to live for. I do not necessarily agree. Unless, of course, you combine it with bone magic, then you are truly lost, as am I. It is different than many forms of magic. Not like tech, whispering away your secrets down the nerves of telephone wires, fueled by energy drinks and iron replacement, a way to replenish what is taken, almost a cheat in the equal exchange. Not like ink, growing in the night, devouring the sleep of the practitioner as they feverishly prepare their manuscripts. And least of all, like pledging your soul to some filthy thing that feeds on your prayer and sinks the hooks of its promise, coated in that sickly sweet poison charm, into the meat of you. Here, within the hallowed halls of barbed wire magic, you are the true Trinity. Your body the temple, the sacrifice, the God. The wire itself, not something that gorges itself full of your pain. It is merely a conduit for your own auto-cannibalism. A way of turning your destruction into something more productive. Once the wire is stripped from the rusting fence, somehow new, clean and new, glinting in the slivers of moonlight that cut through the canopy above, I coil it again, forming tight knots with bleeding hands. A little of me wonders if I could use the sparking power of this moment, however small, to heal the gashes that lay strewn across my pallid thighs. But then I think better of it. I need to keep these scars as a souvenir, a reminder of how bad things can get. And I guess a warning of how little I have left to lose. The final 2 lengths of wire, now that I have coiled the rest into tight bales, I do not treat the same. With delicate precision, I pull up my sleeves, winding the wire gently around the lengths of my arms. Not deep enough to cut. Yet. As I did so, a treacle laugh crept its way from my dry lips. I thought of him and his son, born unwillingly of a person he had broken apart for his prophecy. The son whom he had killed. For the sake of us, he'd said. For his own entertainment, more likely. That petty crown of thorns he had worn was nothing compared to these gauntlets of metal and pain. Though it had kept him there for a few hours longer than he should have had any right to live, along with the strength from the nails. I was careful not to drop blood into the back of the car as I loaded it full of those cursed circlets. Time slowed as the pain began to creep in. I would not be sleeping well this night, though I would try my best. Slowly, something began to break through the crust of numbness I had built through the years, like the first rain in a desert, bringing back the old cores of long-forgotten rivers. Fear. Could not know what would happen when visiting the person which Autumn thinks could help us in our journey. And even as I settled into the back seat of the car for a fitful, broken sleep, my years of shattered trust made it hard for me not to imagine the worst.